And now your featured presentation. It's Film Splaining with your host, Martin Strange.
Thank you, Paul. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Film Splaining. I'm your host, Martin Strange. This is a podcast where I teach you how to watch movies. Hopefully, over the course of this show, I've actually succeeded in that regard, at least somewhat, a little bit. Hopefully, I'm piquing your interest and, getting people to watch things and look at things in a more critical and analytical eye, but also a more enjoyable one as well. I mean, this is all about just like enjoying the art of movie making. And today's a perfect episode for that concept because the films we're going to talk about today are all exemplary examples of that concept. I like that phrase I just made up, exemplary examples. Today's episode, this is a great one. This is a doozy. It's the longest episode yet. It's the longest conversation I've had thus far, and it's because it's about Godzilla. I am a massive fan of Godzilla since I was a little kid. I love most of these movies. I kind of like all of them. There are a few that are just I don't think there's any one of them that are actively dislikable. That's the thing about Godzilla is it's been the most enduring franchise as far as its ability to come up with something interesting and entertaining. I should say interesting or entertaining, and often both. For the purposes of this episode, and I reintroduce sort of the framework later when I'm talking to my guest, but for our purposes today, we're focusing primarily on four main examples of the Godzilla canon, and there are four, I think probably easily the four most important films in the canon. They're four of the most well-known and most recognizable, and actually I want to point out that as of this taping today, one of the films we're going to talk about, Godzilla Minus One, which I mentioned way back in episode 1, is now available to stream on Netflix. So after you listen to this today, please go watch Godzilla Minus One on Netflix. It is available there if you haven't seen it. And even if you have seen it, go watch it again. We're going through basically 70 years of this character and picking out these very important inflection points. My guest today, I should say, is a friend of mine who knows a lot about this kind of stuff. He is very interested in the kind of ubiquitous nature of certain pop cultural figures and how they evolve over time, how they've changed. And we just had a fascinating conversation. We also got really nerdy. There's lots of us just talking over each other and geeking out about this stuff because we both love it so much. So my guest today is Patrick Guest, and I'll speak more on some kind of things that he's doing later on. But we had a great talk, and it took me a while to edit this one, to put it together, because we go all in. So if you like Godzilla, or if you love Godzilla, this is the talk for you. And without further ado, please enjoy Podzilla.
I was hoping this would happen.
I'm gonna get demonetized.
Depends. If we talk over it, it's okay.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so good.
Okay, that's all I wanted to do.
Perfect.
I just wanted that.
One of the best theme songs.
I think, for my money, I think it's the best sci-fi horror theme.
True.
Possibly ever. I mean, there's so many iconic like horror theme songs, but this, for like just the indelible effect it's had over all the movie, the fact that they just reuse it all the time.
Well, it's in a class of its own. It's like, it's not just monster music, it's kaiju.
Yes.
It's the sound.
Right.
It's like the definitive sound.
It's so perfectly suited to the subject matter.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember the first Godzilla movie you saw?
I'm sure, oddly enough, it was Roland Emmerich, because 90s baby. I maybe have seen bits and pieces of older ones on TV or something, but I also feel like back then it was harder to come across it than it is now, especially with streaming and everything. I watched that movie and enjoyed it as a kid. I enjoyed plenty of movies that are more enjoyable as a kid than as an adult. But we don't need to waste time on that movie.
Right.
I got way more into it in like college age is when I think I first saw the original Gojira. I was going back to the classics at that period. Really loved it. It's not exactly the same category, but like when I saw Doctor Strangelove, I was like, oh, this slaps in the modern sense. This is still hilarious, and you're at that age where you're like, oh, older things have a different pace and it's hit or miss. Godzilla mostly holds up, or Gojira, the original.
Right.
And I haven't rewatched it since then. I've done a lot of deep diving into video essays and everything, but I remember fondly being like, oh, this has so much more going on than you expect. And pop culturally, I think the average person is familiar with Godzilla without being familiar with the depth of the implications of the original.
Right.
And that's one of the things I love about Godzilla in particular, and pop culture in general, is when something can, from top to bottom, have so much depth and be a like big, bold, colorful, like Zilla, Zilla, is like a prefix in human language. Like you see a big cat, it's like, oh, that's Catzilla over there. And it's like, it's like Superman or Batman
language. Yeah, I was watching this thing with Gareth Edwards, which was kind of like a little behind the scenes thing on that movie. For the listener, I'll just set up this conversation. We're going to kind of focus on four main tent poles of the entire Godzilla franchise. The first one being that original 1954 film, and then we'll talk about the Gareth Edwards 2014 version for Legendary Pictures, and then the most two recent Japanese films, Shin Godzilla from 2016 and Godzilla -1 from 2023. There was this really cool behind-the-scenes thing of the 2014 version, and Gareth Edwards was saying that one of the reasons he found doing that movie so compelling was because this character is something that you could recognize its silhouette anywhere in the world. Like wherever you go, if there's a silhouette of Godzilla, everyone knows what it is. So it's this ubiquitous pop culture icon that has lasted now for 70 years. This year's the 70th anniversary of the original film.
It's one of those technically longest running, consistent film franchise things.
I think the most films in the franchise too, at 37 now, or 36.
Yeah, there's a lot of them.
Yeah, I was trying to think of like, if it wasn't this, what are some of the longest running franchises? The only thing I could think of was Bond.
I know, and this is going back to what you were saying about the iconography of Godzilla. I was thinking about the same thing. It is that very potent combination, like a formula, where you know what it is when you see it, but you can also make variations on it, and as long as you keep the math right, like there's multiple James Bonds, multiple vibes, multiple looks. Godzilla, same thing. There's a sliding scale of what is Godzilla, but as long as you don't turn it into a giant iguana running around New York City, you're golden.
Right. Yeah.
You can get very goofy. You can get... Shin Godzilla is my favorite Godzilla design because it's so gnarly and it's pushing it so far.
Yeah.
But it's still Godzilla. My thesis is that Godzilla might be the peak example of an icon or phenomena that collapses all of these things into one entity, where one idea can contain multitudes.
Right.
You could talk about like all of human history from Godzilla outward with just World War II, the atomic bomb. There's a whole conversation to be had about Oppenheimer and Godzilla -1 coming out within the same period of time, where people are connecting dots. They're like, these movies are related. It's wild. Yeah, sure. Anyway.
Yeah, and then the sort of third bastard son would be the Zone of Interest.
Yes, I haven't seen it yet,
all three of those movies coming out last year.
Well, Dune Part 2, nukes are a big deal in it. Like many major movies in the last year have an atomic blast on screen as a major point.
Right.
And you have Oppenheimer, where it all starts. You have -1, which is this metaphorical continuation, and then you have Dune, which is thousands of years in the future, where it's like, here's the repercussions of humanity's current trajectory, and it's pivotal through all three. And there's something to be said about that.
We're still dealing with nuclear shit.
And then we got Godzilla X Kong just going completely ham, and we'll come back to Godzilla X Kong.
Literally bananas. What are some of your favorites outside of the four that we're going to talk about? Let's say, like, you know, I think you're a much bigger fan of the MonsterVerse movies than I am. Although some of them I like and think are entertaining, but outside of these four, I tend to stick with like goofier Showa films. I actually really love the standalone Rodan movie. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
I've seen it. That was back when I saw Gojira. I remember it was very campy and kind of slow.
It's also very dark.
It was dark.
Yeah.
They are both quite dark.
It's kind of intense.
Yeah. I don't think I gave it a fair shake at the time.
I watched a handful of these a few months ago. I was sort of trying to attempt to finally just knock out the whole franchise.
Well, they don't make it easy.
No, they don't. And they're like, half of them are streaming, the other half are like tangled up in these rights issues. The newer ones you can't really even watch at all because Toho still maintains kind of all the streaming rights with those, rightfully so. There's this whole thing I'm going to get into later about the physical release of Shin Godzilla. But I'm trying to, because a lot of these I watched when I was a kid. My dad had a bunch of them on VHS.
Oh, very cool.
Because he was a very big Godzilla head. One of my favorites was Godzilla versus Megalon.
Okay.
Which is the one that has Jet Jaguar in it.
Oh, nice.
The one that features the famous sliding drop kick where he's just kind of gliding on his tail. That one's a lot of fun. The first Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla is a lot of fun. I still need to see a lot of like the Heisei era and some of the Millennium stuff as well.
Maybe, I have no idea, half a dozen, not a full dozen, like somewhere in the half a dozen range. After the original back in college, I tried to find a few over the years, and I really liked, I should have done my due diligence and figured out which ones these were specifically, but there's one that I think a later era, before they took a hiatus, there was one, I think it's like All Out Attack, like Tokyo SOS.
Right.
All Out. I could be combining some.
I think, yeah, one is Monsters All Out Attack, which was a big influence on -1, actually. In the research that I did, he said that the way that Godzilla behaves in that movie is very influential on the way that his Godzilla behaves.
Interesting.
In that film. Yeah, there's just so many. There's so many.
Yeah. For me, to sum it up, though, you touched on an interesting thing where your dad is a Godzilla head. And so I didn't have that, but I've always been interested in the iconography of Godzilla because it's like, it's the ultimate giant monster. And I've always felt that giant monsters are waiting for their time to shine in cinema because just scale, like that's the whole point of a big screen, is to show something bigger. So there's a whole conversation to be had about Gareth Edwards as like the only person to really get scale.
To understand that?
Yes. I have yet to see a whole lot of the Godzilla franchise. And you mentioned me being a fan of the legendary MonsterVerse. I want to be clear. I am a fan, but like I'm a fan overall of media phenomena and movies very much so. I want to, make movies someday. I love something that can be multiple things at once, and Godzilla is the definitive version of that, where we now have hardcore Godzilla, Japanese original, deep, dark, meaningful Godzilla coming out of Japan, and simultaneously what you were saying, you like the big colorful Godzilla era. That's the MonsterVerse now. That's fully what they've gone into with Godzilla X Kong. It is a big love letter to like colorful, wacky ridiculousness, and I really enjoyed it. It is not nearly the same thing as Godzilla 2014, and I mostly love that movie too. It's a beautiful mess. It's an imperfect franchise, but I love that it can exist parallel now to, it all exists under the umbrella of Godzilla. Like, this is the golden era of Godzilla, and I think it's only going to get better, hopefully, because we can keep having these crazy American versions. And I'll wrap this side tangent up here, but I actually think there's a really fascinating thing about Godzilla having a lot of American DNA, and not just in the deep, dark sense that you don't have Godzilla without how World War II ended.
Without the bomb.
But there's a lot more American influence throughout the franchise and from the beginning than I think people really realize. And there's a lot to be said about the fact that we now have two parallel American Western franchise version and the Japanese version, and just what they say about the cultures and the industries and just the fact in general, like I said, that there's so much American influence throughout it, not just in the negative sense, but actually like they were directly drawing from like King Kong and I'm forgetting the name, but it's like 40,000, the monster from
20,000 Leagues.
No, not Under the Sea. It's the creature from 40,000...
20,000 Fathoms?
Fathoms?
Is it
yeah,
Fathoms?
Something like that. Yeah. You do your research, and it's like, oh yeah, they're like, hey, we need to make a new movie. That's our job, is to make movies. Yeah. What was popular? A big monster movie, and Kong is famous, and they're like, oh, let's try to do our version of it. And then it's the artistry of like, let's do something meaningful with this. It wasn't like, oh, we have an artful tale to tell that's motivated to tell itself this particular way. It's, oh, we're going to make a monster movie. Let's make it meaningful.
Right.
And it was pretty much the director who I think really led that charge.
Ishiro Honda, and it was Eiji Tsuburaya who did all of the effects for the film. He devised the idea of this movie of Godzilla from 1954 with the producer Tomoyuki Tanaka, who I believe was on another film production of some kind of kaiju variety in Indonesia that got scrapped. So they still want to go with this idea. The first idea is for an octopus monster, and that quickly gets scrapped for more of a like prehistoric dinosaur type beast.
Sounds cheaper.
Yeah, much cheaper. In fact, Tsuburaya wanted to use stop motion originally for this movie. They were not able to do that because there were not enough craftsmen in Japan at that time who knew the method, who knew how to do it. So they just had to go with the rubber suit.
And history was changed
History
forever.
was, forever changed. Yeah, I mean, the basic premise of the film, if you don't know it, is that this dinosaur-type beast is awoken from undersea hibernation due to atomic bomb testing. It then decides to ravage Tokyo. It's kind of a force of nature that's destroying everything in sight. And this scientist has to decide if this weapon that he's engineered should be used to destroy Godzilla. It is very clearly a metaphor for the horrors of nuclear war. And they told the story this way because at the time, censorship was so strong in Japan that they couldn't outright make a movie that was like a reaction to the war. It was deemed too political or too risky. But the movie itself becomes a kind of a box office sensation. At that time, I think it was one of the most profitable films in Japanese history. It was also one of Toho's most expensive films. That same year, they produced Seven Samurai for Akira Kurosawa, which won the Japanese Academy Award that year. Came out with mixed reviews. Some people thought it was too on the nose, or that the effects looked kind of cheap and silly. But you were mentioning the American influence on this, and it does start like pretty much from the beginning, because it was such a popular thing in Japan that the movie was heavily re-edited into an American release in 1956.
Godzilla, King of the Monsters.
Yeah, with Raymond Burr. Kind of just inserted into the film.
Yeah, they take a lot of stuff out, put a lot of stuff in, cover up a lot of stuff, round off the edges. That's why I think you could talk about the history of the world from Godzilla outward. I actually, in college, took a course under this Japanese professor that was comparing and contrasting Western history and film history and Japanese and Eastern history and film history.
Yeah.
And we were watching movies going back and forth. So Seven Samurai and then like a comparative film in the West. And so Godzilla is this perfect example of this mixed DNA of Western and American, because now we have the two franchises, and we have Godzilla King of the Monsters 20, whenever that movie came out, and then the quote-unquote original American one, which is just a bastardized re-edit of Gojira, and censors everything.
Yeah.
And you actually touched on an interesting thing about the politics of the original movie. I was, for a long time, under the same impression that they couldn't talk about things openly, and that's why they made Godzilla the way they did. I dug into it a little more eventually, and it does seem as though Godzilla came out after the censorship was kind of lifted, and which is kind of why Godzilla is able to exist. But still, you have the mix of like, you don't want to, how far do you push? How blatant do you get?
Right.
And this is actually something I've been thinking about a lot in the lead up to this episode. The idea that Godzilla is a metaphor or represents just nuclear warfare, it's actually like a step further than that. It's certainly under that umbrella, but it's because the testing is what really the whole thing is about. It's the idea that humanity unleashing something older and deeper and mutating it and unleashing it in a way that we can't stop and is unstoppable. So it's not just the warfare element, it's they kept going and then they get to blend it all together. Godzilla, interestingly enough, doesn't always get very like rah-rah angry at the Americans. I mean, Shin Godzilla certainly, they all do. Yeah. But like, they very much point the lens back at themselves as a culture a lot of the time. Yeah. And I find that really fascinating.
A lot of it is about reckoning with their own kind of place in the war and in the world at large. And I mean, we'll talk about it, but especially Godzilla -1 is very much directly related to that. They directly, in this first movie, Dr. Yamane mentions that this monster is clearly prehistoric. They find this out through finding the trilobites in the footprints, which have all these levels of radiation. We're soon introduced to Dr. Serizawa, who's this kind of mad scientist character with an eye patch. This provides like a lot of the really fun sort of like B-movie, like old-timey exploitation movie subplot of the film, which is that he's created this weapon that is an oxygen atomizer, oxygen destroyer, and he's very conflicted on whether or not to use it. He's been performing tests in his lab. Very memorable. Yeah, very memorable moment in the lab when he is showing the weapon to the main girl, Imiko. Of course, we don't actually see it until later, but I think this is the first instance of one of my favorite conventions in like sci-fi storytelling, which is just when something dies, it just becomes a skeleton. It just like becomes bones. Spooky, actually, scary. Like I rewatched it last night, and weirdly enough, the night before I was watching Adventure Time, and there's an episode of Adventure Time where they do the exact same gimmick. It's a really funny gimmick. It's never not entertaining.
There's a whole Rick and Morty.
Yeah. We need more of that. We need more people just like becoming skeletons when they die in pop cultural stuff. Favorite moments from this movie?
Well, the one that really sticks into my head and has kind of become increasingly famous, especially as Godzilla has been reintroduced to the zeitgeist in recent years. The like mother huddled with her children, like frantically as Godzilla's bearing down on them, like screaming and crying and telling her children like, we'll be with daddy soon, like in heaven. It's insane. It's brutal. And then Godzilla like does his atomic breath, which back then isn't causing huge nuclear explosions. It's just breath that a cloud emits and kills everybody. It's just
igniting everything.
It's gnarly. And I'm not saying like, ooh, yay, that's so crazy. It's dark. Yeah. And at the same time, in a movie where skeletons, appear in an aquarium to show how scary this eye-patched mad scientist's weapon is, that's the blend that I love. And then finally, at the end, when they, depending on which canon you're in, kill Godzilla or don't or whatever, but Godzilla gets liquefied as well and turns into a skeleton. It's sad. It's like, because Godzilla is a King Kong-esque, like, tragic figure this whole time we've ruined this poor creature and we have to kill it. And there's a self-sacrifice at the end.
Yes, exactly.
It's a deep movie.
There's this very Ahab moment with Serizawa where he's like, I have to sacrifice myself with this weapon so that this technology can never be used again.
Like, talk about an ending.
Yeah, very dark. I love that sequence. I love the main, like, destruction of Tokyo Bay sequence because we get such artistry from the work with the miniatures and the work with the actor in the suit, the way they're blending this with the actual footage shot with actors. It's, for 1954, it's kind of baffling. When I rewatched it last night, I was sort of just like, jaw on the floor. Like, how did they achieve this? Some other things I wanted to mention too. The moment where the choir of children are singing this song, and it's like this very somber reflection, like kind of before it's right when they've decided on this plan to send.
It's kind of montage.
Yeah. It's sort of showing the destruction of the city and and like the aftermath, and they're sending off Serizawa and his team, and they've all gathered together in this. I guess it could be either a church or maybe just some kind of like local rec center type place where they're all gathered together, helping each other kind of heal their wounds from the destruction. And all these children are singing, and it's this dark like funeral dirge. I meant to look up the lyrics just to kind of like read the lyrics from it, but as I was watching it, it was like it's very heavy, but it's so powerful. The score. I mean, we mentioned the score at the top, but just
Slaps.
the pure ingenuity of what Akira Ifukube, I believe is the name. What he did with creating the roar. Are you familiar with that?
Oh yeah, it's the resin string.
It's on a base, like a large
base.
He used like rubber gloves and coated them in resin.
Once you know it, and you can hear it in your head,
Mhm.
and it's actually one of my biggest criticisms of the legendary MonsterVerse is they completely dropped the ball on the roar as far as I'm concerned. And Midas 1 is now top tier. They nailed it, where it's just like bone shaking. When you see it in the theater, and it sounds like original Godzilla, but just amped up to a million.
Yeah,
they nailed it.
It's because they replayed the original and like over loudspeakers or something, and then manipulated that.
It's perfect.
Yeah, there's all kinds of good stories about the roars over the years.
Oh, and before I forget, you mentioned the choir and the seeing everybody recuperating from the damage. That's one of to kind of connect the dots to future movies we're going to talk about. Shin Godzilla. Some of the criticism I've seen of it, which I only thought of it as like unanimously loved movie, but there is some criticism where it kind of doesn't have the normal people element as much. But it does,
because it's so focused on the bureaucrats,
and we don't get as much, like, we see people fleeing and stuff, but not as much like recuperating, and it's very quick in the amount that we see just the average person. But I think that you can tell different stories with Godzilla, and I think that that's perfectly valid. If someone wants to criticize that, I get it as well. So it's just it's subjective, but it's an interesting element of to what extent do we follow the average people recovering from the damage, and
because that further sells the destruction, and it allows you to connect with the emotional human element of the film, of like relating and being able to empathize with what they've just gone through. I mean, especially the last movie, -1, does that so well. I think it does it better than any others. I mentioned the stop motion thing. So the suit that actor Haruo Nakajima wore weighed over 200 pounds.
Wow. And
it often got up to 140 degrees Fahrenheit inside the studio. He fainted frequently.
Yeah, I always hear these stories about people on sets wearing these kind of things, and it's tough now, but at least they put, little fans and stuff.
Oh,
but
yeah.
Back then, it's just, you're just killing people.
I mean, yeah, and under the lights. But he was so committed to the role.
Dedicated.
Actually ended up doing it 12 more times.
Yeah. He was a pro.
He was the guy. He was Godzilla for a long time. A little fun fact I also found, mentioning Seven Samurai, Akira Kurosawa was a friend of Ishiro Honda's and loved this movie, and he would often come to set and watch what they were doing on his days off from shooting Seven Samurai. So that's kind of a fun little interesting tidbit. I think we've got the gist of that one. Moving on to Godzilla from 2014, directed by Gareth Edwards. The first of the produced by Legendary Pictures, distributed by Warner Brothers, so-called MonsterVerse titles. It wasn't titled that before this movie was released, but as soon as this movie was released, literally 2 days after the premiere, Legendary greenlights 2 sequels.
Like, can we edit Samuel Jackson into the post-credits to be like, we need to introduce you to
yeah, I'm here to talk to you about the Godzilla Initiative.
Yes. Monarch, it's a thing now.
This movie stars Aaron Taylor Johnson, Elizabeth Olsen, Bryan Cranston, Juliette Binoche, and Ken Watanabe. They named Ken Watanabe's character Serizawa as well, I guess, which is kind of a callback to the original.
Yeah. Well, and then it gets weird because I think some weird edits happened in Godzilla versus Kong because there's another Serizawa in it, I think, but he's like a bad guy. But then they don't really explain it, and he just kind of dies.
Yeah,
There's some weird editing.
yeah.
Went on in there.
There's some muddy plot in those films, to say the least. Basically, the synopsis of this film is that an American soldier is attempting to reunite with his family and gets caught in the crossfire of an ancient rivalry between Godzilla and two parasitic monsters known as Mutos. Muto is an acronym that stands for Massive Unidentified Terrestrial Organism, correct?
Yeah.
Right? I couldn't remember if it was unidentified or if it was like underground or something like that.
Yeah, it's unidentified. They blended in bits of arachnoids or whatever they're called from.
They look just like the things from Starship Troopers.
Yeah, they specifically drew from those. They're trying to mix and match a few things, but I love it. Like the female, the bigger one. I'm a bit of a nerd about this movie. It has like gorilla qualities, and then the smaller one obviously has the wings, and they gave it. Like hawkish certain qualities too, and I really love the monster design.
I do too.
Yeah,
I was thoroughly impressed by it. I remember seeing, first of all, the trailer for this movie fucking killed.
Well, and have you seen one of my favorite, maybe my favorite trailer of all time, the Comic-Con special like pitch trailer that they did before?
Is it just the Halo jump scene?
No.
Oh, okay.
It's none of the material from this trailer is in the movie. It was like we need something to show an audience, and it has Oppenheimer's quote, which now in hindsight is so weird because we know that while he was recording that, he was getting down and dirty with Florence Pugh at the exact same time. So it's pretty crazy. No,
that happened.
But that actually happened. No, it's one of my favorite trailers, and it's not even for a movie that exists because it has monsters in it that aren't even in the movie. But
because it's just
they didn't get the tone from that into actually. Oh, here's why this is relevant. -1 is like the adaptation of that trailer where they fully carried over the tone. And we'll get to there, but it's an amazing trailer.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember watching it with my dad, and we would it was the not early days of YouTube. YouTube had been around, but
no, I remember.
I had sort of like been watching stuff on YouTube, and we would be like pausing it to try and look at the footage and see if there's like, is that Ghidorah or is that because it was just showing those like very giant frames of just destruction basically and like something kind of amidst the rubble. So this movie also a box office and critical success.
Not massively, I think.
Not
but
massively.
Decently enough.
Box office it did really well over time, especially worldwide. I think it's still actually of this recording Godzilla x Kong may have surpassed it, but just up until recently it was still the biggest box office of any Godzilla film.
Oh, gotcha.
It was severely criticized for Godzilla's insufficient screen time, only being in 11 minutes of the movie. I remember people getting really angry about that. I liked it. I thought it was a good choice.
He went in the Jaws direction. I think he could have like a few more percentage where it would have been more satisfying. That's a movie where I will not go down this rabbit hole because we could record a whole other podcast. Yeah. It is like 10% away from being a stone cold masterpiece movie.
Do you want to give a truncated version of your pitch?
Well, not to spoil it for people who haven't seen a movie that came out 10 years ago.
Yeah. We'll just say spoilers for Godzilla 2014.
You don't kill Bryan Cranston, you kill Aaron Taylor Johnson, and then you follow Bryan Cranston in the dark aftermath of losing his wife first and then his son pretty much because of himself.
Yeah.
And then we would get a better actor for the rest of the movie, a better premise. You get to see him finally act opposite, I'm spacing on his name, the amazing legend who plays Serizawa. Ken Watanabe.
Yeah.
They don't even get to work together.
I know.
You can barely tweak the premise. He has like friend not really a friend, but he has a sidekick who I think gets killed. Aaron Taylor Johnson kind of works side by side with another soldier at a certain point. I'm like, just introduce him earlier as a friend. Be like, oh, he's going to Hawaii. It can tie things together. And then Aaron Taylor Johnson dies. And then we follow his friend for the parts that are Aaron Taylor Johnson specific.
Yeah.
And also make him a Japanese American actor. Right. And like, pretty much do the same premise and like a few minor tweaks. And it just ups the stakes exponentially. And like, you didn't keep any of those actors aside from Ken Watanabe and British actress whose name I can't remember right now. But they kill her off in
Sally
the next
Hawkins.
one. Yeah, they kill her off in the next one anyway. Right. So But yeah, it's almost a masterpiece.
I know,
Up
yeah.
until that point, it's really good, and then everything after is like 90% of the way there.
Right.
But,
Yeah, I agree.
A little more Godzilla, a lot less Aaron Taylor Johnson,
Yeah.
and a lot more Bryan Cranston, and it would have been mwah.
It is. It was massively successful to the point that it prompted Toho to decide to finally reboot their own franchise just 2 years later, which we'll talk about momentarily.
Yes.
This film sort of plays fast and loose with the origins of the creature itself. It introduces this idea of alpha predators, or like titans, as being this ancient race of beasts who reside under the earth.
I'm a fan. I
Kinda
like
since the
this
dawn of
idea of
time.
a primordial Earth with giant radioactive monsters.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun. And now that they've gone into the whole Hollow Earth thing, I'm a big fan. It's very Jules Verne.
It's bonkers.
I love
It's
it.
completely bonkers.
It's great.
When
It's
they-
opened up a
when-
whole new, and no one has done it. Like, no one else is doing anything like that. And the
Yeah,
way
and,
they've visualized it, but this is getting into further territory.
Right.
But we'll just say, to make it relevant, the sliding scale and how exponentially we go from Godzilla 2014,
to Kong, to King
Kong
of the
Skull
Monsters.
Island, which is my least favorite of them. I know a lot of people do like it, so I'm not faulting anybody, but it doesn't hold together well for me. There's a lot of good stuff that I've grown to appreciate in that movie. And I think Kong is the biggest marvel of this whole franchise of like, oh snap, we've already done the like an ape that you can connect with through the Apes franchise, Planet of the Apes. And now you just make him big, and oh snap, you can empathize with this character. And you haven't seen Godzilla X Kong.
No, I haven't.
We follow Kong on like a Kong adventure
Yeah, I heard
without
it's-
humans.
I
for
heard
a
it's
lot
very
of the
Kong
movie.
heavy. Yeah.
And I'm into it. Like there's nonverbal communication and crazy stuff going on in crazy locations, and the director of that one goes real fun with it.
Yeah.
So it's not perfect, but I do enjoy it for how crazy it gets. But
Yeah,
anyway.
this idea takes root pretty quickly, and goes off into its own thing. In this film, it's kind of established that there's an organization called Monarch, which is sort of devoted to the study of these titans. We mentioned Sally Hawkins and Ken Watanabe. They're kind of the two main people behind that. Godzilla is introduced in this way that's kind of a callback to the original film. They even mentioned that in 1954, they attempted to kill this creature and failed. The presentation of this movie and the frame of it being what it is, directed by Gareth Edwards with his background of VFX, is what I really love about it.
Mm-hmm.
He just attacked it from a completely different perspective, doing all these cool things like using rotoscoping, using real environments, going to actual locations, shooting on locations with motion controlled movements. What he wanted to do was to create the most realistic looking Godzilla movie ever made up until that point, and really achieving this by putting the camera on a human eye level in virtually every shot. Anytime you see the kaiju, you're seeing it from either a ground perspective or a perspective that maybe someone's looking through a telephoto camera lens, or if it's from a helicopter, like there's that one kind of very well-known above shot where he's swimming. But he wanted to use like real people and real objects in the frame to sell the massive scale of these monsters. And it wasn't this approach gets abandoned like almost immediately in favor of like, oh, the camera can now fly in and out of through the entire earth, and all that stuff.
I'm so upset with so upset. It's why I don't like Kong Skull Island, because he throws in, like, I was thinking about it last night. There's 2 shots in that movie where any positive, I'm just like, I can't overlook the random 300 scene where Tom Hiddleston is running around with a samurai sword and the camera's zooming in and out and going all crazy, dude. And then when we introduce Kong and the helicopters, it's a pretty cool sequence, but they do like this big 360 zoom and we're going through the helicopters. And I'm like, okay, all my scale that you're setting up over here, you're just tossing it out the window. Like, pick one or the other. Yeah. And it varies from the rest of the franchise. Sometimes they do it well, sometimes they don't. It's weird. I hope they could branch off and allow themselves to do simultaneously big and colorful and goofy and like dark and grounded. And I think this Monarch show, which I haven't really seen, I've seen bits and pieces of, but it sounds like a mixed bag. So but anyway, that's another tangent.
Favorite moments from this one, I love the first moment when the Muto is awakening in the nuclear like kind of containment factory. It's when Cranston dies. The Halo jump is like cinema, I mentioned it before, but seeing that trailer when it was, it's basically just that scene with the music set, and you're just like, oh man, God, it's so fucking good.
The airport sequence for me.
Yes.
I continue to this day periodically just like on YouTube, like I'm gonna watch that scene because just the timing, and they even like went back and made changes to it to like bump it up when they were making it. Where just the timing, the sound, and the reveal of Godzilla.
Yes.
And,
he mentions that, like, setting up that whole sequence of like one shot you'll see like kind of his tail sort of slide through the edge of the frame, and then the next shot, like there's that great shot where his foot just kind of like stomps right outside of the window, and then it's just this constant building up to finally to his reveal, where the camera pans up and you see just like the size, and has the great roar. Obviously, the Golden Gate Bridge set piece is really great. I remember being blown away by the effects on that.
Every monster sequence is what sells the movie. It's why you want more of it, because there's so little. Atomic Breath really is like because he holds off on it, and then he like starts teasing you with like his little dragon imagery, and then when he introduced the like charging up the tail is now like, and they've built on that in the future movies too. Yeah, when he breathes down the Muto's mouth and just burns its head off, and then he just kind of tosses the head in the water. That's like that's some good WWE shit. They really go with the wrestling in Godzilla X Kong. Godzilla almost, I think you could call it an homage to the move you mentioned of the sliding tail double kick. He jumps and stomps on a giant spider at the beginning of in like Vatican City.
I know there's like a drop kick moment at some point that people were mentioning.
Yeah, there's that, and then he suplexes King Kong off of a pyramid.
Yeah,
he fully flips him.
I'm kind of excited to watch it.
Godzilla's a maniac in the new movie.
Yeah, I'm kind of excited to watch it.
Things you have never seen Godzilla do.
Yeah,
and also the fact that he's only in it for like the least amount, I think, out of all of them, practically.
Oh, wow.
But every second he's on frame, he's like, they condense it where every time we cut to Godzilla, he's going absolutely ham. He's just like charging up to go fight someone, or he's fighting someone and going on to the next thing, and he's just pissed off the entire time. He's like, I'm getting through this as quickly as possible. So it's wild.
Ironically, you mentioned the Planet of the Apes series. One of the facts that I found was that the cinematographer Seamus McGarvey accidentally stumbled onto the set of Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, which was shooting nearby, thinking that their locations looked identical to where they were shooting Godzilla. And he was like walking around with his light meter and stuff and then just eventually realized he didn't recognize any of the crew members.
He's on the wrong set. I can imagine. Yeah, they were out in the woods for a few sequences. And
very funny, like sequence of events there.
And the fact that you're walking from a Godzilla movie into a Planet of the Apes movie in the 2000s is hilarious.
Yeah. The Halo jump was actually shot for real by a professional team of skydivers. Very cool. The design, Gareth Edwards attempted to, he was inspired by the original and attempted to make it look as real as possible and as close to the Toho design, which I feel like that's kind of what it is. It's this one right here. This is from the 2014. I feel like that is the closest, probably up until maybe some of the like the early 2000s they start going for that stockier, like thick trunk leg look.
Well, he's a thick boy in 2014.
Yeah.
I think
and he's only gotten bigger too, I think.
Well, it's weird. I'm not going to go on a huge tangent. Stop myself. But I'm a bit of an apologist for King of the Monsters, the newer one, not the old one. Very operatic, and they do a thing where in a comic book, I guess, in between the two movies, Godzilla goes through an evolution where he fights a big Muto and blah, blah, blah. But his spikes change from that movie to King of the Monsters. And they give him more of his classic spikes back. They have more of the kind of fractal kind of shape to him. And then they do the toyetic thing of each new movie. He's evolved again.
Right, gets
and
crazier
the newest
and crazier.
one, he's like bigger but slimmer and pink and angrier, and they're just going full like. Yeah. That's what I was saying. I love the variety. Like he's always Godzilla, and I actually, as much as we say I love the legendary ones, I'm not a huge fan of the original or the 2014 Godzilla look and sound. The design of him. Like his face is a bit too like bear and crocodile for me.
It's more like kind of
snout.
Yeah, heavy snout.
And I've said this. I don't like the roar. I really like the classic. The closer you get to the classic, and they do this weird thing where I even saw it like in IMAX, in like full blown IMAX, like the real domed thing when it came out.
Yeah.
And you think that when he does the big roar in Chinatown at the end, that it's gonna like knock your socks off.
Right.
And it just sounds like a jet engine to me. It doesn't sound like a guttural roar. It sounds like a made up sound.
Yeah, it's more mechanical.
And they give him a weird like hiss thing too, where it's like he does this like jet engine roar, and then the like kind of the original sound of this kind of like and then this hiss at the end.
Yeah.
And I just love the -1 sound where it sounds like the original, but
It's
it
perfect.
sounds angry and guttural, and it just sounds like Godzilla. And you got all the scale right for the visuals in the 2014 Godzilla. But the sound, I was like, okay, but not great. The Muto, on the other hand, because they made something completely new, I love how they're these weird
really cool sound design on
EMP
that,
creatures and how they light up and
like the
interact with each
clicking,
other.
and they're doing lots of weird like communicative, very animalistic, I guess. In a way, they're kind of hammering home this point of like these things have existed for millions of years. And
But also they're this weird sci-fi element of they have this like electromagnetic thing going on. And so when they interact, and then there's a funny bit in King of the Monsters where Thomas Middleditch is talking to some panel.
I forgot he was in this movie.
Yeah, for briefly. And he's like, here's some footage of the monsters mating. This one might have it blurred out. I don't remember. And they'd show the shot from the movie where they like Mutos put their nuzzles together and do this little clicking thing together, which I love. And they blur it out like, oh, that's them like exchanging
they're
DNA.
about to mate.
And I'm like, that's a funny bit. That's a good bit.
We got to move on
Yeah,
to Shin Godzilla
Hell yeah, we do.
from 2016, directed by Hideaki Anno, the creator of Neon Genesis Evangelion, and his friend Shinji Higuchi, who directed some Gamera films and is a VFX supervisor on the end of Evangelion, and they worked on a lot of stuff together.
He kind of convinced Anno to do it. As far as I'm
Right.
aware.
He had originally declined because he was dealing with some depression and also trying to figure out how to end Evangelion, and didn't think that he was up for the task, but Higuchi convinces him to do it.
Low key, majorly important figure is his little buddy there, because I don't think we get Shin Godzilla. I don't think we get -1. We don't get how they wrapped up Evangelion.
Right.
Which how into Eva are you?
I am like 2 or 3 episodes away from finishing the series. I've not watched any of the films.
Okay, yeah.
But that's been my stasis point for a long time now.
If you want to bring me back for Eva, we can talk about that, because
I do want to.
dovetails well with this, because you can't talk about Hideaki without Anno without talking about Eva.
Right, so much so that he reuses his own music from the series in this movie.
Love it.
Anytime this music comes on in this movie, it just pumps me up.
It feels like an Eva movie in a lot of ways.
Yeah, he really is bringing anime aesthetics and stylization to a live action.
That's my favorite element of that movie, is the
Production.
radical editing and pacing. And
Even
whole
the
thing.
camera work
Yeah.
is like, to me, like you look at some shots and you're like, oh, that's definitely an anime shot. Like just some of the way that he frames people's faces and like characters standing, and I just think of all the you mentioned the editing, but like all those quick cuts in the office rooms where they're deliberating and stuff.
He makes mundane things exciting.
Yes, absolutely.
Which is crucial.
This film kind of goes back to the point of the original movie, which is taking real life, devastating, tragic events and commenting on them in this lens of Godzilla. This one specifically being about politicians struggling with all this bureaucratic red tape in order to deal with the sudden appearance of a giant monster that seems to have evolved whenever it is attacked. And the story behind this film is that it's directly in response to several compiling devastating events that happened in Japan in March of 2011, starting with an earthquake, which triggered a tsunami, which then triggered a nuclear disaster at a power plant. And the fallout of that was horrendous. The government's response to it, the fact that they weren't telling people official things of what was going on, and it was a very just like confusing, confounding thing that the Japanese government was not able to adequately handle whatsoever. I learned
They didn't handle it well. They didn't give out the right information.
Yeah.
It was pretty much botched bureaucratically all up and down.
Yeah, tons of
chain of
people
command.
missing, like thousands of people missing, thousands of people dead.
It was a devastating
Yeah,
disaster.
yeah,
a
truly,
lot of, tens
like-
of thousands.
I don't know if at the time I wasn't super aware of it happening at the time. I kind of remember things in the news, but when I was doing research on this movie, they basically said that it was the second most devastating thing to happen in Japan since the bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And they sort of used this as a vehicle to tell a new Godzilla story and decide to make Godzilla more horrific and grotesque than ever, even starting in his like kind of like tadpole form.
Yeah.
I remember like when I was watching this and he just kind of like hops out of the water and is sort of, you know, it's the first version. I'm kind of like, all right, what's going on here? Like, where are they going with this? And then, you know, as you see, the more attempts are made to destroy this creature, the bigger he grows and he evolves. This becomes like the highest grossing live action Japanese film of that year. It was nominated for 11 Japanese Academy Awards, winning Best Picture and Best Director.
Because Hideaki Anno has not had enough wins.
Right, yeah.
For someone who has suffered so much from depression, and like we said, this movie, I think, really turned a lot of things around for him.
I think so too, yeah. And right after this, he makes the two other movies, the Shin Kamen Rider and Shin Ultraman. I do too. I think they're available to rent on Apple or iTunes or whatever it is now. Apple's movies page.
Sure.
When I was attempting to find this film to rewatch, I only watched it for the first time a few years ago. We spoke about it.
I was lucky. I saw it in theaters when it came out. Although I think when I saw it, I missed the first few minutes. But then I watched it at home several times. I've seen that. I've seen Shin Godzilla a bunch. I love it. It's one of my probably top 5. It's a masterpiece. It's an 11 out of 10 movie.
Yeah. I tried. The first time I found it was a kind of DVD copy from my local library.
Oh, wow.
And then the second time, when I was looking to rewatch it for this conversation, found out it's not streaming anywhere. Periodically available on Amazon Prime to rent or buy.
Where I had rented it.
But then has sort of been like taken off of there now. It was periodically available on Crunchyroll. You can actually go to the page that says Shin Godzilla, but you aren't allowed to play the film. They don't like actually have the file. It's baffling. In the rest of my research looking for this movie, I've found out that there's basically been a few different physical releases. And the only one that's been widely available up until recently was the Japanese version without subtitles. So unless you are fluent in Japanese, that's not going to do much for you. But there was a Blu-ray released within the last few years, Japanese with English subtitles and also an American dub on there, which I purchased this morning from Amazon, which is the only place you can buy it. Let it be said that I do not support the Amazon Corporation. On mic, I occasionally have to buy things there because that's the only place I can find them.
Hey, no ethical consumption under capitalism.
Right. Right. You being a massive fan of this movie, what's the thing or some of the things? Just talk about what you love about it so much.
Well, so I'm a fan of this podcast, Eye of the Duck, where they pick a scene that like summarizes or encapsulates the essence of a movie. And so just to get that kind of idea out of the way, not a hot take at all. Everyone has said this who talks about Shin Godzilla. The atomic breath sequence is maybe now that we have -1, there's a tie for the best atomic breath sequences. But it is the emotional crux of the whole movie. It kind of doesn't reach the same heights after that point, which is why I think -1 is technically the better film. But they're both high up there. But -1, I love how, not to pivot to -1, but that movie is amazing in the middle, but still continues to have an amazing finale.
Yes.
I love the finale of that movie. It's hard when you make the atomic breath in the middle be this big dramatic thing, and then you have to follow it up. -1 does it really well. Shin Godzilla, it's not as great of a finale. It's not a bad finale by any means.
Sure.
I still love it. Anyway, as for the appreciating the whole movie, I just love how radical of a departure it is.
Yes.
And it's the most realistic, which is why I feel that is a bit lost in the last bit. They go as realistic as they can, but it's still kind of goofy where it's like, we have to knock over Godzilla and stick tubes in his mouth to send coagulant into him. It's like, I love it. It's hilarious, but everything up until that point has been so grounded. But you got to make up a way to beat him.
And that's also when it kind of like leans back into the anime stylization of it. You know, when it's like by the end of it, I think it's almost like it almost works better for the film that they go back into that kind of like crazy anime, just like throwing all these ideas at the wall at once, you know?
Yeah, and it actually made me think that is the essence, if I could sum it up, that I like most, is it's one of those stories that's about like humanity coming together. And as crunchy of a concept as it is, I love like the municipal, bureaucratic, like it's a brilliant thing storytelling wise too, to reckon with your country's failing on that level, and then having a story that's like, here we are pulling together and actually making it work.
But also putting like such a spotlight on that element of the story of the fact that like most of this movie, like most of what you're watching, are these like bureaucrats just kind of deliberating in rooms. You mentioned Dr. Strangelove earlier. This movie is very Dr. Strangelove in a way.
Sure. No, actually, satirically, I hadn't even connected those dots. Very much so.
Yeah.
I love that. More Kubrick connections with the 2014, the music, and anyway.
Surprising amount of Kubrick connections, Yeah, I love any time the Evangelion music starts playing. The fact that they use that and the original, like True Blue, the original score.
That too, it's such a like postmodern movie where they're using the original sound of Godzilla and he looks physical, but he is CG. I know there's a whole thing, they made a whole puppet that they didn't use, a whole animatronic. But they nail the look really, really well. Oh, it looks great. I already said how much I love this look. It's like an abstract as you can get with Godzilla, with still being, it's hideous. He's gnarly, he's mutated, he's got the longest tail he's ever had. He does these weird,
the mouth being like opening up like
the eyes turning like metallic Predator. Before he does the layers of, and also I like how it integrated the evolution of Godzilla as a character into the literal storytelling, and now the next movie has built on that as well, of like Godzilla going through these different phases, so now you can have different kinds of Godzilla on screen. And it's like an encapsulation of his whole franchise in one movie, each movie now, where you get these different versions of it. I love the grounded nature. I love the ensemble element. I love the satire, the humor. I love how hard it goes in its meaning, its significance. It's talking about meaningful things in the way that the first movie was, and then using a big sci-fi monster to encapsulate it. And the fact that Japan will pop culturally look at itself so critically. There's too much to talk about Japanese culture, but I'm always fascinated when you do the math as an American and like, they're a small country with only so many people that are, and technically they're running fewer and fewer people every year. And the fact that a whole country can look at a movie that is like pop culturally, like it's Godzilla, like there is no bigger like singular icon from Japan than Godzilla. And they love Godzilla, which is so fascinating. And they love Evangelion. Evangelion is massive in Japan. So the fact that Hideaki Anno made a 11 out of 10 Japanese Academy Award winning film, it was severely underrated in America. But there's a whole other conversation to be had of the trajectory of foreign films and America's relationship with them, and Godzilla being a point of crossing over where the Shin Godzilla was more popular than they expected, and it paved the way for -1, which was way more popular than they expected. And at this point, the next time around, they gotta just release it as a full-blown American release. Like, people don't mind subtitles anymore. Like Dune 2, I was thinking about this. Denis is a multilingual guy, and he brings that into his movies with the multiple alien languages and hand signals. There's subtitles all up and down both those movies. And everyone's gotten used to it. Anime and foreign film got people into that.
I mean, Parasite won Best Picture.
Parasite won both Best Picture and Best Foreign Film. Like, we have totally crossed the threshold now. And there's a fun comment to be had about Godzilla being this kind of like weaving in and out of the traffic cones of like increasingly popular both in the American version and the Japanese version, which like that's unprecedented. There's nothing like Godzilla in existence.
Well, this one did premiere in the U.S. A little less than 3 months after the Japanese premiere. Is the first Godzilla movie to premiere in the same year
In both markets.
in both markets since Godzilla 2000. So basically
wow.
16 years. There was originally supposed to be a kind of family drama and romantic subplot, but both of those were written out by Hideaki Anno. I think he just wanted to focus more on the main storytelling engine.
And we don't have to get into it. You know the crazy alternate version of the movie that he, like the other stages of Godzilla?
Vaguely, yeah.
He turns into a universe. It goes
Right.
full
Yeah.
Evangelion, and
Yeah.
they pared it way down. But he keeps evolving until he goes off into space, and then like becomes a new universe.
Right. Well, and
he
there
becomes
were-
a god.
Yeah, and I know there were plans for a sequel as well that ultimately got scrapped because they just couldn't crack the story, I think.
I don't think you do crack
There
it.
were
It's
just
good on
there
its
were
own.
the producers were just kind of like we don't really know how to follow this up.
Yeah.
Satomi Ishihara actually had to learn English for her role. She did not even know that she was going to play an American diplomat until
can
after
tell,
she was
you can
cast.
tell. No offense to her.
Yeah, no,
but
I mean, but shit, she probably learned English in what, a month or so,
God bless her.
something like that. Yeah, I had on here I love in the final shot of the human hands kind of trapped in the tail, like reaching up. That's a very evocative, powerful image.
I like how they're now ending these Godzilla movies with like a like
yeah.
what'll happen next time. And
Right.
if you don't make a sequel, that's the only right way to do it.
Yes, I feel like this one, and actually I just kind of realized this, but I think a through line through all four of these films is that they, even though they're all drawing on, the original idea, they could all be completely self-contained movies without even having to connect to this giant, shared universe of all these guys. Like if you didn't have all of the Showa era movies or all the Heisei stuff, if there was just like these throughout time, any of them could stand alone as their own Godzilla movie, I
Exactly.
think.
It's an anthology in that way,
Right.
where you can keep retelling a new version of the same story. And there's a whole conversation we don't need to have about the era from the original up until they take a hiatus after Godzilla 2000. What is it? 2000?
2000,
Godzilla
yeah.
2000.
Mhm.
Where you have this crazy continuity where for some stretches it's deeply continuity driven from movie to movie, and then
Yeah.
others it's like, okay, this is a reboot of the original, no, this is a sequel, this is
Right.
the second one to the sequel, and it's like now with
And we're having the same-
Halloween and
yeah.
the same thing
We're
where it's
having
like,
the same
okay,
issue.
this is Alien 2.5, we're
Right.
ignoring the third movie and
Yeah.
going back, and all of them do it, and Godzilla's been doing it longer than everybody.
Yeah.
And now it's best like, yeah, just keep doing a new one every
Just keep
time.
reinventing
I think
it.
they could do the same thing with James Bond, honestly. Like, you don't need to have 10 of the same movie from one actor, or
Right.
10 movies from one actor. You could have a new James Bond every time. New era, new look, new vibe. Like, why? Why not?
Yeah, totally. Let's move on to Godzilla -1.
Yeah, let's.
Because I
get
want to
into
give us
this.
plenty of time to talk about this one.
The best Godzilla.
Yeah.
Because the best Gojira movie is Gojira. The
Mhm.
best Godzilla movie is Godzilla -1.
Yeah, I would agree. It took seeing it that second time in black and white to really kind of cement. I mean, the first time I saw it, I was like, wow, fuck, this is a masterpiece. But I think the second time when I watched it, and I don't know that you can maybe speak on this for you, but for me, I don't know that the black and white edition really added much to it.
I liked it.
I liked it, and it was interesting to see. I'm glad that they did it. And it's in a way, it's this great callback to the original. But I don't know that it added much to like the richness of the story or of the filmmaking for me. If it had been filmed in black and white specifically, I think maybe it would be a little bit of a different story.
Well, that's a big thing is between, like, we talked Parasite earlier. He made a black and white version of that, and he was pretty open about the fact that it was just purely like, oh, people do this now,
Yeah.
and why not? It'll look
Yeah,
fun.
they did it with Fury Road, and
That I can see him. He was interested in doing that for his particular reasons with the visuals of that movie. But yeah, Godzilla -1, he talks about like at a certain point imagining it in black and white from the beginning, and I think the work that he went through to make it black and white, if you read in it, you've I'm sure read up on it. He didn't just click a filter.
Right.
They from the ground up did
Yeah.
everything to make it look right. And I think that's about as close as they could have gotten. I doubt they would have even literally shot it in black and white. Like, I don't know if That would have been crazy to really. They wouldn't, knowing the tiny budget of this movie,
Right.
they could not have shot it
Yeah.
for real on film or in black and white. But I don't think it elevates it to a crazy new level. But it does do that thing where watching it without the color lets you appreciate different elements of it.
Yeah.
And it, as being a period piece, it really lends to it, I think, in that way where you can really immerse yourself in it as feeling like of the time.
Yeah, you pointed out that one scene when they're kind of like amidst the rubble, and then the woman just sort of like rises out of the environment, and you don't really even notice that she's like in the environment until she stands up. You don't notice that the first time because you can kind of see her. But when it's in black and white, she's very much blending into the environment. So this film, directed, written, and with VFX by Takashi Yamakaze. It is set in post-war Japan. It's the first true period piece Godzilla movie. Mm-hmm. Because every other one is set in the current time that it's in. Some
time travel in some of them.
Well, yeah, sure. Yeah, if we're talking like Invasion of the Astro Monster or something.
There's a Ghidorah one where they go back in time and there's like a baby Ghidorah that turns into
it's that one, I think. Invasion of Astro Monster. Yeah. They're from Planet X, which I guess is where Elon Musk lives now. So this follows a former kamikaze pilot named Koichi, who is suffering from PTSD from being a kamikaze pilot, but also from an encounter with a giant monster when he is kind of stowed away on an island with some fellow soldiers. This, I think, is definitely the closest in like its scope and its themes to the first movie as any can get, especially being set specifically post-war. I remember really loving the idea of like you're actually kind of seeing the life of this character and the people he interacts with evolve over time. Like it is there's the ticker at the bottom of the screen that's like 2 years later, 3 years later. I really liked that concept of it because Godzilla is like this ever-present force in the movie, but you're not necessarily like always aware of, well, when's Godzilla going to show up again? Because you're so invested in the story of this guy and the woman that he ultimately meets and the child that they ultimately decide to care for.
It's the best standalone movie. You could take Godzilla out of it, and it's a good movie. I've even done the mental exercise of like, so how do you do it? Is there like a rogue ship that replaces Godzilla as a threat, where it's like, oh, these Japanese soldiers are still out there, and I don't know. It's weird you can't really replace it. If you did somehow edit this movie to have no Godzilla in it, it's compelling as a short film.
Right.
Again,
totally.
It falls apart because it all hinges on Godzilla, but the non-Godzilla parts are the best of the
finale.
Entire
You'll have to do some retooling to figure out how to end it. But I think it's the darkest, kind of saddest, most visceral.
Also the most uplifting, in my opinion.
Sure.
I really love it blatantly says it has a non-sacrificial theme to it.
Right.
It blew my mind.
He does the Dark Knight Rises thing.
Well, not even that. Well, that's funny. That's a funny way of putting it. But literally, the
Fix
characters
the autopilot, Mr. Wayne.
The characters blatantly saying, like, no, living is how we succeed. Don't sacrifice yourself. Yeah. And then the whole emotional catharsis of the film is the main character deciding not to sacrifice themselves to save the day. And like, I'm an easy crier at movies, but this movie in particular, there's one moment that like every time I've seen it, it has made me weepy, and I'm always impressed with it because it's not what you would expect. It's after they, spoiler, after they have gotten together to plan the big finale, they're leaving the building, and like the scientist and the fisherman captain are talking, and their young buddy is with them, and he's all gung-ho and excited.
Yeah.
And they're like, you're not coming with us. And he gets so upset. And just the comment of like, you're experiencing such an amazing thing by not having gone to war and not having to go to war. That is something to be proud of. And it always chokes me up.
And you need to like seize that as well.
It chokes me up because we don't get these stories. Now we are turning a point in society where it's like, oh, maybe it's bad to just keep telling everybody to sacrifice themselves so something bigger than them is the way to make the world a better place.
Yeah.
Because then you just get a bunch of sacrificial lambs throwing themselves at the pyre instead of people going, no, survival and cooperation is what matters.
Yeah.
And yeah, to say not going to war is something to be proud of. It kills me. I love that about that movie.
Yeah, I agree. I think the way that the true like horror of the devastation is portrayed in this movie is easily the most powerful way. I think specifically of like that scene, and it's been a minute since I've seen it, but I'm picturing specifically the scene when he's when our main character is kind of looking up at Godzilla and all of this like ash.
Well, right after the atomic.
It's
scene.
yeah, right. It's immediately after he kind of unleashes his breath the first time.
That's my Eye of the Duck moment. Is like the blast is the best. It's so sad, but it is.
He's
it's
looking up
devastating.
and all of this, and you see Godzilla just towering over everything. All this ash and smoke and shit. There's debris falling from the air, and he just starts unleashing this scream, this primal scream. That's just like, I cannot take this shit.
And that's the protagonist screaming, and it's right after Godzilla does his best, most epic roar in all of the franchise. It just blasts you when you're hearing it in a theater, and they give it that deep, like it frays the edges of like the audio limits where it's like this rumble and this like frying effect. It's too loud to hear.
Right.
And it's emotional. Godzilla, the way he looks and the sound he's making, he is screaming, and then the character screams right after.
Yes.
And it's very clear connective tissue between the two. It's not trying to be subtle about it, but it's the most emotional Godzilla roar.
Yes.
This is why I love this type of movie in pop culture. It's like Godzilla's roar is an emotional moment in the movie, and it's deliberate.
Yes, and that comes from a very recognizable place. Yamakaze mentioned that this movie is directly inspired by, obviously, all the 70 years of the Japanese perspective on this kind of story, all the previous Godzilla movies, but also specifically the work of Hayao Miyazaki and Steven Spielberg. And there is a lot of Steven Spielberg in this movie.
Very much so.
Especially the kind of Jaws sequence.
Well, and we talked about
him following the boat.
Well, that 100%. The famous shot from 2014 Godzilla pointing down, him going under a aircraft carrier. They do this. It's not an aircraft carrier or whatever, but they do the same shot. And that's what I'm like, the weaving in and out where he's like, this is the most, we haven't even said it yet, but this is the most hybrid Japanese and American feeling movie where he tells a story that I think is why it did so well in America is it's distinctly Japanese, but very Western and American vibe in its storytelling.
Yeah.
And it interweaves that DNA perfectly, where he's recycling shots from the American movies, and it doesn't feel like cheap or anything. It's like, oh, he's homaging the movie that's homaging.
Yeah.
That's,
you can really feel like, there's the elements of Jaws, elements of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, I think, a lot in this. The final, when I read the Miyazaki thing, my mind immediately went to The Wind Rises, of the main character being a pilot, and there's just so much there is so much connective tissue around Japanese cinema and American cinema with this movie.
Very intertextual.
Absolutely. It grosses almost 116 million worldwide on an estimated 10 to 12 million dollar budget.
Jeez,
some reports had it being higher at 15, and then Takashi Yamakaze came out and said, "I wish it was 15."
Yeah.
He said, "I wish I had that much money." There's a great, if you want to kind of dig into the behind the scenes of this stuff, there are a few really choice YouTube clips of the team kind of working on this movie VFX wise, and the director himself kind of bouncing around from department to department in a rolly chair.
Yeah, they released their own behind the scenes stuff.
Yeah, all the stuff they did. I think I told you, but there's a moment that they show the fact that the main boat that we're on most of the time with the fishermen, the fact that like only half of it is actually a built prop, and they use it over and over again for different scenes, and they're just the
connective tissue to Gareth Edwards. Like, these two guys are, in my opinion, revolutionizing the industry.
Yeah.
I got to try to condense this so we don't take a forever conversation, but Gareth Edwards has the most amazing career of any filmmaker. He did his own movie Monsters, which if you don't know it, check it out. It's really cool. He tiny budget, does the special effects himself,
Great
and it
movie.
holds together pretty well as a movie. That gets him Godzilla, which the story he tells is he's like on the phone with WB or Legendary, and he's like holding his copy of Gojira, and they're like, "Hey, do you want to direct Godzilla?" And he's like, "Duh!" And so he does his second movie is Godzilla, and it's almost a masterpiece. And he also, drawing from Spielberg, Jaws, he's like, the less we see, the more, and Jurassic Park. Now he's directing a Jurassic World movie. But his next movie was Star Wars Rogue One, which again, amazing use of scale and size.
My second favorite Star Wars movie.
One of my favorite Star Wars movies. And then he does The Creator, right? Like he's a bunch of time off until The Creator.
Yeah, there's a long gap.
And I really like The Creator. I think it is very underrated as a movie. I have a poster of it that I got when I went and saw it. But underrated movie. I think people had the wrong expectations for it, and I think that threw off the
It suffered from some marketing issues, too.
Yeah, but the main thing to say about it is how he completely changed the game of how you make a movie of that scale. Like, they could not make that movie in a normal studio sense. It was going to be like $300-400 million, and he did it for like less than 100 by just going to like 80 locations around the world. And
this is his thing, like shooting on location, rotoscoping the elements in afterwards.
Planning.
Same planning
thing
ahead.
as
He does like all of these previs shots.
Special effects guys knowing what they're doing ahead of time.
The
streamlining of the whole thing. And now, to tie it all together, I think these two guys, like, if people listen to them more, which especially after the success of Godzilla -1, I think we're going to be seeing a lot of this guy. But Gareth Edwards, I hope the Jurassic World goes well, and I hope they're giving him a chance to explore cheaper, like the whole industry is tightening up right now. And if he can say, hey, I can make a movie like The Creator, but if you actually let me make it about something that people want to go see, which I wish if more people had seen that movie, it could have totally changed Hollywood. But anyway.
This becomes the third highest grossing Japanese film of 2023. It surpasses Shin Godzilla as the most successful Japanese Godzilla film. That is, financially speaking, at least. Obviously praised for its VFX. It won the VFX Oscar.
First Oscar-winning Godzilla movie.
First nomination and win for a Godzilla movie at the Oscars. Praised for the score, praised for the screenplay, characters, and social commentary. Gareth Edwards mentioning briefly again, he was invited to a screening of this movie, and after seeing it said this is what a Godzilla movie should be like. So obviously high praise. Steven Spielberg saw this movie 3 times, I think he said, and he like cried, said it was a masterpiece.
Gosh, what a feeling that must be.
Yeah.
Good Lord.
Yeah.
You need some dopamine. Look up those interactions of him and Spielberg.
Oh yeah. The photos of them together were quite something.
He gave him a Godzilla.
I also love that the team from this movie always carry around a little
Godzilla,
an action figure of Godzilla with them. It's very sweet. They each of them had like different ones when they were at the Oscars. We mentioned the beach sequence, the first appearance. Obviously,
it's so incredibly good.
It's very effective.
They get to Godzilla quick, but then they bring him back multiple times. But he evolves every time. And I didn't even notice this until like a video essay recently. The fact that deep sea fish are brought up to the surface when he comes up, it's foreshadowing of how they beat him in the end because they're all bloated, which I didn't even put together. I was like, oh, they look weird, but it's like, oh, it's because they're expanding because they're deep sea creatures. It's the pressure that's killing them, and that's how they beat him later on. I'm like, they foreshadow it. I didn't even put it together.
That convention of using the fish floating to the surface
he's coming
to kind of signal when he's coming is so fucking brilliant.
It's instead of dun
right,
it's
exactly. It's that version of that for sure. The Ginza train sequence is definitely among my favorite. When he realizes, like, when he hears on the radio that Godzilla's coming to Ginza and he knows his girl is like on the train in Ginza or whatever. It's this brilliant, like, the whole sequence building up of it is great.
A lot of homages to the original with the guys on the roof. They do. I didn't realize until recently they do a straight up shot for shot, like when the building falls down and we're following it down. Like that's in the original movie.
Yeah, I had not put that together either.
I saw it in a video essay. The shot is like exactly the same, where you're following the them on the roof down as the building is collapsing sideways. Which is such a great guttural effect.
Yeah.
And they did it in the original movie.
Mm-hmm.
So it's so impressive.
Yeah, seeing those guys on the roof and like the tail comes towards them and kind of smashes part of the building. Yeah, this one is one that just gets the sense of scale perfect.
I love all the actors.
Yeah, the actors are great in this movie. They're so good.
I want to see them in everything now. Like every single one of them.
Yeah, especially the trio on the fishing boat.
They're so good.
They're like the Three Stooges.
And he brilliantly, he's like, this is the doc, this is the captain, this is the kid, this is our he knows what he's doing for a global audience storytelling wise.
Yeah, obviously the atomic breath moment, charging up the scales
stick out.
Obviously the finale moment when. And I'm always forgetting the main character's name here. Koichi, when he flies the plane into Godzilla's mouth, the great explosion there.
Well, how about the fact that Godzilla's got X Factor rejuvenation powers, and that's what makes him scary? It's not that he's indestructible, it's that he keeps coming back.
Keeps regenerating,
It's a totally new take, but it also builds off of Shin Godzilla, which is similar. He's more mutatey, scary, like cancerous in that one.
Yeah.
In this one, when they blow his head half open and then it grows back, the effect is amazing. It looks so good. Yeah. And then you're like, oh my God, we've never seen like this version of a Godzilla where you can do tons of damage to him, but then he comes back and he looks scarred.
That moment when he's chasing the boat, and they're so letting the mines go, and they just kind of roll right into his mouth and explode. The first one's a dud, which is a really funny element. But I think my favorite part about that sequence is that he's clearly just toying with them, because he could catch up at any moment and overtake the boat.
Interesting.
But he's just kind of like
that.
He's just kind of like hanging back and slinking through the water.
He feels animalistic to me. It feels less.
It's like hunting.
Yeah, it has a strength. We're seeing a creature that is rapidly evolving, but is still very primal and primordial in its behavior. And in both American and modern Japanese versions, the directors always say like, "Oh, I drew a lot from cats. Like my own cat is a big."
Yeah.
And I like this look of Godzilla as well. Shin Godzilla is my favorite, but this is maybe my second favorite.
Yeah,
I love when they go the distinctly Japanese route, where there's kind of like this feline and like dragon-esque quality to it. He feels very classic, but has a lot of personality as well.
Yeah.
And the fact that he goes from like a prehistoric monster thing to a bigger and bigger Godzilla that has that classic look. Like, too much to say about this movie.
I know. Yeah, there really is. So the -1 title refers to the fact that Japan had already been devastated by World War II, i.e. brought down to 0. But with the emergence of Godzilla, it puts Japan into the negative, aka -1. I think that's a really interesting naming convention. And
effective.
Yeah, very effective, the way they came up with that. We mentioned it's the first one to be a period piece. Yamazaki hosted a screening for Hideaki Anno, who also stopped by during filming. Reminiscent of our earlier story with Kurosawa and Ishiro Honda on the first movie. Very interesting kind of confluence of events there. This movie debuted at 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is not a great metric to measure anything by, but the fact that it debuted at 100% is pretty fun.
And it must still be pretty high, because it has been nothing but positive.
Oh, I think so. Yeah. As the rollout of the movie kept coming, and the re-release in black and white, which I think they perfectly nailed, like how to continue the run of this thing throughout.
They're good at it.
Yeah, throughout the award season, throughout re-releasing in black and white. It only grew stronger and only had more word of mouth as it kept going. Like, I remember telling people at work and stuff, and a lot of people not even realizing there was a new Godzilla movie out.
Oh, yeah, I was telling a lot of people.
And being like, yeah, and it's really fucking good.
They gotta just go full bore next, which big question of what do you do next time?
I know, I'm really interested. Because, Toho has this deal with Legendary where they can't release a film the same year that Legendary releases a Godzilla film. So they kind of have to take turns. That's why
they're trying to fast track the new Godzilla X Kong. So I think Toho has probably specifically said every time we release one, we take a little break. We don't rush.
Right.
Like I actually love the fact that we get 2 versions, because they take their time. When 2000 wasn't good, they're like, let's take our time.
Right,
and they were gone for like a decade.
Yeah, they weren't worried about about just continuously milking the IP just for dollars. And I mean, in fact, the production of this one started as early as 2020. Much of its early like pre-production work was done like during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And so they were unsure of when the film could be released. And then I don't know which one. I think it was Godzilla versus Kong that came out in 21.
Yeah,
it was the
during the
day and date
pandemic.
Max streaming release one.
The only one I haven't seen, well, actually, I didn't see Kong Skull Island in theaters either, but I didn't see that one because it was pandemic time.
Yeah, that is what put off -1 for the next time around,
Which
basically.
is good. So it could have come out during a time where we could actually see it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the reason it's ultimately successful, because something like this needs to be seen in the theaters.
Oh, absolutely.
I kind of wish I had seen it a third time, to tell you the truth, but
yeah, I saw it. Black and white was my third time seeing it, and I could have.
Yeah.
I could probably see it one more in theaters. At least, but give it a year, I will. If they re-release this movie,
I'm sure.
Toho just needs to get their rights act together with this whole Godzilla thing, because they could like Ghibli Fest, G Fest. They could be releasing Godzilla movies in theaters every year. Just do a new batch of them and do like Shin Godzilla or
last year I think they did a lot of stuff to coincide with this movie. So there was like a big Godzilla Day celebration.
I think they do like a con kind of thing too, like a G Fest, but
they re-released. Well, they did a new 4K restoration of the original film last year, which I would have fucking loved to see in a theater.
Oh yeah, gosh.
This is the first non-English language live action film to debut at #1 in the U.S. box office since 2004. Do you know what the movie was?
Miyazaki. What?
Do you know what the movie was in 2004? That it was.
That probably was Spirited Away.
Hero, the Jet Li
I know that one.
action movie. That's the last time that a non-English language
fascinating.
live action was #1 at the box office.
Sorry, I was going to say the Miyazaki came out not long after, and I think they both played off of each other really well too, where people were excited to go see Japanese language movies, and also we were talking about the Miyazaki connection as well. So, and Hideaki Anno is rooted in the school of Miyazaki. He made sequences in Valley of the Wind and has worked on other stuff too.
Yeah.
So it's all intermingled in really fascinating ways. And I won't do my big rant, but I think that they should do a live action Akira adaptation, and it should be Hideaki Anno and Takashi Yamazaki cooperatively doing a 2-part movie. Yamazaki do the first one that introduces everything, more grounded, and then let Hideaki go crazy sci-fi psychedelia in the second one, and I think you would have had a Dune level hit on a global scale.
They could get this guy, the lead actor who plays Koichi.
I think you should try to go really young
to be like Tetsuo or something. Well, yeah.
I think you should get actual kids.
Yeah,
honestly,
I guess
like
so.
Teenagers.
Yeah,
it hits way harder.
Or you do the thing where it's like a bunch of 25-year-olds, but they're playing younger.
I think it's better if you get them really genuinely teenagers.
Yeah.
Like, I think you could get some really good actors. But yeah, I think flesh out all the other background roles with all those guys for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because there's tons of roles in that, in Akira.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, Akira's a whole
Tons
other
of
conversation.
Any final thoughts? Any final...
It's the golden diamond era of Godzilla.
Mm-hmm.
We've got the most Godzilla ever. I hope that they can figure out the rights so that you can get more and more old Godzilla on a regular basis. I could go see Godzilla movies in the theater several times a year if they did that. We could have a whole fascinating conversation about where you go next.
Mm-hmm.
I have thoughts.
Where do you think they go next?
With Japan, I have no idea. That's what I love. I love that I have no idea.
Yeah.
Like, don't do sequels to either of them. I think it's even better if you end it with their, like, you expect a next thing, but you don't do a next thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just wait and come up with a new thing. I'm actually more interested in what they're going to do in the Legendary Zone.
Yeah.
Because they're going to continue to do Godzilla X Kong together. I had thought maybe they split them off again and do like just a Godzilla movie and just a Kong movie and then bring them back together again. Yeah. I think...
I feel like that well is going to run dry pretty quickly.
I think they do one more Godzilla X Kong, destroy all monsters.
Yeah.
And my take on it is I'm currently wearing a shirt with Space Godzilla, and I have a whole premise on a Space Godzilla where it's like, what if... They do really interesting stuff in the new movies where there's like an ancient civilization from within Hollow Earth and Skull Island, and they are like psychic people, like drawing from the old movies again.
Okay, yeah.
And They've got really interesting stuff there. I think you could do a whole thing where like there was an ancient civilization that was advanced, and some of them left into space and like took a Godzilla with them.
Right.
And Godzilla like clearly evolves and changes depending on the circumstances. Yeah. So literally they come back and they're like, we want to take over Earth, and we have like a giant space Godzilla that kind of like creates smaller Godzillas that are like little zombie Godzillas with their weird cool crystal stuff.
Yeah.
And anyway, stupid, flashy, but you do a big apocalyptic and you kill off the original Godzilla and the original Kong because they've already set up Baby Kong. They can introduce a new space, like a
Manila.
A what?
Let's get Manila back in here.
Yeah, bring in all the classics. Like people want to see the classics again, but
I think they could do something interesting with the Mothra story, because that lore is pretty fun and
they should do
unique.
a period Mothra story.
Yeah.
Like with a Mothra vibe, because that's the thing about Godzilla too. It's a universe. The second Godzilla movie, Gojira movie, had raids again. He fights another monster, and then like the third one was versus Kong.
Yeah,
like this whole idea.
Yeah, they
of the
bring in
monsters
Kong
fighting,
very quickly.
Yeah, from the beginning.
And I wasn't even aware, but there was a Mecha Kong in one of the early, I think like a 66 or 67 movie, and his face just looks exactly like Donkey Kong.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Very funny.
Anyway, yeah, my thesis is that Godzilla is the pinnacle of pop culture representation of something that means so much, and you could ask the average person anywhere in the world and they would like recognize Godzilla, but they also probably don't know how deep the well goes. People should watch the original Gojira if you haven't. Yes. It's actually really good. Jump around all the old ones that you get every vibe you could think of serious to silly to childish to goofy. A lot of them are genuinely very good.
Yeah.
And the new ones, Japanese ones specifically, 11 out of 10 masterpieces. They are very, very good.
Yeah.
And Legendary Pictures is now just, you get the whole gradient from like pretty serious Jaws kind of vibe to slightly goofier, very goofy.
Yeah.
And I think they're all fun. And I wish they could figure out a way to do both tones within the American franchise, but I think once they've gone this colorful, it's going to continue to be colorful. I think they can tone it down now.
Yeah,
a little more grounded.
I think there has to be some kind of like middle ground, kind of splitting the difference between the fun, goofy camp and the more kind of serious-minded stuff, which is maybe kind of what they're going for with this TV show, although I really
The show
know
is weird.
about
They
it,
ended this first season. There's a whole timeline thing where it ends. There's also time travel. It's weird. So yeah, we don't even need to go down that road.
Yeah.
But
great stuff. I think we covered it. I'm going to go out on this again.
The remix one, the hip hop, that song, it's so good. Squeonk.
All right. That was great.
The end.
Okay, there it is. There you have it. Our biggest pod yet. I hope you made it all the way to the end. I hope you enjoyed what we had to say and our rambling kind of fanboy experience talking about these films. Yeah, this is the kind of stuff that this is the reason I love doing this pod, because I get to talk with people who are passionate about certain things, and oftentimes those passions align with my own. So, speaking of passions, next week's episode is a doozy. It's also speaking to a particular franchise, a particular fandom, and a recent phenomenon. Well, I shouldn't say recent phenomenon. A phenomenon that is happening and has been happening, and something I've wanted to investigate myself for a while. And boy, did it really go off the rails. But hopefully you'll stick around for that one. But either way, please go watch all of these films. Go watch Godzilla. If you've never seen the original, please watch that. As I mentioned before, -1 is on Netflix. Shin Godzilla is very hard to find. I could only find it in physical form and in basically one form that was only available from Amazon. Godzilla 2014 is widely available to stream everywhere. You should have not a hard time at all finding that one. And most of the other films, the Showa films, are available through the Criterion Collection or on Max. And yes, please enjoy. Take us out, Paul.
This has been Film Splaining with Martin Strange. We hope you enjoyed the show. Till next time, happy viewing.